It's raining, which is great. We haven't had rain in Oklahoma for a while, and it's been so hot and horrid, so we really need this rain. It's slowed down, so I tried to record earlier, and it was just raining so hard you could barely hear anything. So now that it's slowed down, I thought I would go ahead and try to get this recorded. An interesting topic that I wanted to talk about today. So I had this dream the other night, and it was just really a stupid dream, just really odd. But then the things that happened the next day, it was like this synchronicity, and that has just been on my mind a lot. And so I wanted to talk about things like synchronicity, deja vu, the merging timelines theory, all of these things that I've just been really interested in lately. Not that I had thought about synchronicity in a while. I hadn't been looking at any of that stuff until after this happened. And so yesterday and today I was going back and looking at more of this stuff and reading up more on this, because I do find it an interesting topic, especially the merging timelines theory, the Mandela effect, those types of things. But so let's start with the synchronicity and my dream. So I had this dream, and really crazy, really stupid, really nothing, but for some reason there was a bug. Now, I don't do bugs. I don't like to harm things. So, when possible, I get my husband to come and, scoop it up in paper and take it outside. Or if it's not a good bug, if it's something that could cause some issues, I ask him to just take care of it and I walk away. Some things I leave, like house spiders. House spiders don't bother me because they eat the bad bugs and I don't worry about them. They belong in the house, so taking them outside could be harmful to them. But this was not a good bug. And I was chasing this bug around this room. And I was trying to hit it with a shoe. And every time I would try to hit it, like I would hit something else with the shoe, or I would hit beside it, or it'd fly up and away from me. And it was just really weird. And I spent several minutes trying to unalive this bug. And finally I did. And then I went over and I was getting dressed, or trying to get dressed. And I'm going through my drawers and my closet, and I'm just looking and looking, and there's all these weird things in there, things that I don't actually have, bathing suits and different pajama sets and sequiny ball gowns, but nothing that was like regular clothes that I could wear that day. And so I keep going through, and every time I would go through the closet or the drawers, it was different clothes, but it wasn't anything that I could wear. And I felt like I was just going in circles, like I'm going from one to the other. And I even said to my husband, I'm just going in circles. I can't find any clothes. There's no clothes here that I can wear. Okay. So stupid dream, right? Like nothing. The next morning, yesterday morning, I got up and I went into the kitchen and I was feeding my piggies and my dogs. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, was in there getting a cup of coffee, and she turns around and she says, Mom, there's a bug on the cabinet. I think it's a wasp. And I look, and there is a wasp climbing up the cabinet door. So I take off my shoe and I smack it and I unalive it, which I ordinarily wouldn't do. Ordinarily, I would be waking up my husband to come and take care of this wasp, but I just did it. And then I thought, wait, that dream, that's so weird, because I hadn't seen a wasp in the house in a long time. So then I went on about my day, and I went to a client's house, and that in the Tulsa area, and then I was coming back and heading toward Bartlesville to my office. Well, it was the weirdest thing, because so the entry ramps to northbound 75 are closed, a lot of them. There are a few that are still open, but most of them are closed for construction. So I'm driving through, and it's like this ramp is closed and this ramp is closed, and my GPS wants me to go around in circles to get on this ramp, and it's like, you know, go down and get off and get back on the highway and get off on this, you know, and just keeps wanting me to keep turning around to get off on these exits that are closed. And so I ended up winding around downtown Tulsa, thinking, okay, I'm going to get over here and I'm going to get where I need to be. But I took a wrong turn and ended up deeper in downtown Tulsa, which is, to me, it's a maze because I don't know it that well. And so I was just like going in circles and couldn't find the road that I needed. And finally, I got on the road that I needed, and I was going toward the office, and I thought, man, that is so weird after that dream about the clothes, and here I am like going in circles and stuff, trying to find the road that I need so that I can get this exit onto 75, and I can't find it. And I spent a good 30 minutes just driving around in circles trying to get to where I was going, but I'm in downtown Tulsa, so it's like all these one-way streets. And anyway, I just thought that was so syncretic, and it just had been plaguing me and just heavy on my mind that this happened, and this was so weird. And so then that brought up that feeling of deja vu that you get sometimes, and what, you know, the different theories on deja vu. And one of the theories that I've been reading a lot about lately is the merging of timelines. And this merging of timelines, this isn't like a new theory or anything, but I've heard a lot of things talking about restarting the timeline, changing the timeline, merging the timeline, and it goes into why we have this Mandela effect and why we have deja vu sometimes. So first, if you're not familiar with the Mandela effect, it's called the Mandela effect, named after Nelson Mandela. Because when Nelson Mandela died, and I believe it was in the early 2000s, there were a lot of people who believed he had actually died in prison in the 80s. And they distinctly remember seeing this, you know, seeing this on television, hearing about this, that Nelson Mandela had died in the 80s. But in reality, you know, in our reality at least, he didn't. In this timeline, he didn't. And so then that leads to all these other things that people remember that aren't quite the way that they are. One of the big ones that I've heard, and one of them that I fall into this category too, is the Berenstain Bears. Loved those books when I was a kid. They were my favorite books. But I very distinctly remember, and I remember this so clearly because I remember thinking, how is that spelled? I had gone to the library and I was looking for these books, and I wanted to know how they were spelled so I could, you know, look for them using like the card catalog and stuff. And I very distinctly remember I had to know how that it was spelled, and looking at these books and trying to remember the Bear Stain and not Bear Steam. And I Berenstein, you know, EI, not stay. Well, it's actually Berenstain, not Berenstein. And I just remember that so vividly because I kept confusing the two, and I was really, you know, hyper aware of how this was spelled because I kept confusing it and saying the wrong thing and looking for the wrong thing, and I needed to know how to spell it. That's just who I was as a kid. I wanted to know. And so, and then now it's like, wait, I was wrong all along? That's weird. So, there was that. Another interesting one that I recently found, one that just kind of blows my mind, is King Tutankhamun. So King Tut, I, like a lot of kids, went through a phase where I loved archaeology and I was really into all of that, and I remember reading this, seeing his sarcophagus, seeing pictures of it, being really interested in it, and of course movies about it, all kinds of stuff. And I distinctively remember his sarcophagus having one cobra on the head. But there's two cobras on it. Two. I don't remember ever seeing this. When I looked at it, it was so unfamiliar. That's not what I saw. That's not what I know. And it was such a weird feeling, like this is not the sarcophagus that I grew up with. So there are a lot of those little things like that where people remember things one way, you know, remember certain things with a color or a certain thing like Fruit of the Loom. I remember a cornucopia, but there is no cornucopia. And there never was a cornucopia, apparently. But I distinctively remember this cornucopia. So these types of things are just odd, and they don't seem to make sense to me. But, you know, it's one of those things that without these theories, I would shrug off, like I'm just not remembering it right. You know, childhood memory, our memories do fail, you know, but so many people remembering the exact same thing that you remember, and it's not actually like that. So that brings us to this merged timeline theory, which I think is really interesting. Now, I don't want to say that I completely buy into this, that this is something that I truly believe. I find it very, very interesting. So, in the merged timeline theory, basically you have these people who believe that our timeline and the timeline from other people, other dimensions, other worlds, other us's, has merged. And there are many different theories for why this has occurred. And one of those theories is that something catastrophic could have happened in one timeline and it caused the other timeline to merge. Other theories are, and I read this one this morning that I found interesting, and I found it most interesting because this was written in 2019, and a lot of what I've written was after 2020, you know, and COVID. So this was written in 2019, and there was this theory that everybody has multiple timelines. Like there's multiple of us floating around, in these different dimensions, living these different lives, and everybody's life is slightly different. And so we have these different us out there. At some point, our timelines can merge, and it can be something conscious on us, that we're seeking this higher spirituality or this more meaning, and we are searching this out and merging our timelines ourselves. And I don't know, this talked about, moving up into the fourth and fifth dimensions and kind of playing with reality and being able to merge these ourselves. But it seemed like a conscious choice was what I was reading. But other theories that I have heard have to do with COVID and the CERN Hydro Collider. The big Hydro Collider thing in CERN. So a couple of those are, with COVID, it restarted the timeline, or that it merged these timelines, and this goes back to that disaster theory, and that something disastrous and big happened and caused these mergings of timelines. And basically with that, you have, like, COVID came along, and with COVID, you had this this big epidemic. And this big epidemic kind of caused like this, like maybe more people in the world died, or it was catastrophic and it killed out a lot of things, and it went a lot of different ways. And maybe because of that, because there was so much catastrophe from COVID, that timeline merged into this timeline where it wasn't as devastating. And so with that, your self from that timeline merged into yourself from this timeline, if that makes sense. And so that made it to where you maybe has some of those same memories from the other timeline. So you have these deja vu moments. You remember things that were slightly different in that timeline that are different here, and that, is that Mandela effect, those synchronicities. Oh my goodness, I cannot say that word now. The synchronicities that happen, that we see, those patterns that we're seeing. Somehow we're more hyper aware of those because we're noticing that part of us doesn't feel like things are completely right. And so you've got that, but then you have the Hydro Collider, the Super Hydro Collider at CERN, and them restarting that, and they've restarted it. They've started it several times and restarted it, and when they restart it, maybe that causes something that causes timelines to merge or collide, dimensions to collide. And this is causing some of this. And so at different periods in time, our timelines have merged. And when that happens, we we still have some of these thoughts, some of these memories from our previous timeline that are coming in, bleeding into our individual during this timeline, and we're remembering that. And maybe some people are just more hypersensitive to it. So I thought that was just kind of interesting, that maybe when we start noticing these things, we start really noticing those patterns. There are other really interesting things that I've been looking at a lot lately and reading about and watching videos on, like glitches in the Matrix and things like that, that are really interesting. I heard a story the other day. It was on a podcast where they were talking about a person who, as a child, told a story and had told this story his whole life about getting up in the middle of the night and going into the kitchen and seeing a man in a hoodie making a sandwich. And then as an adult, he's back at his parents' house and he gets up in the middle of the night and he's making a sandwich and turns around and sees a kid. And it was like both of them seeing a ghost, but they're seeing themselves in different time periods. So I thought that was interesting too. And that kind of goes into this timeline and the flexibility of time. And anyway, I just thought this was really interesting, and that whole dream thing with this synchronicity of it. For some reason, I cannot say that word now. Just really made it interesting and got me to thinking. So if you have any thoughts on that, stories, I would love to hear them. So just send them in. And until next time, bye.